I thank you, God, for most this amazing day, for the leaping greenly spirits of trees, and this blue true dream of sky, and for everything which is natural, which is infinite, which is yes. I who have died am alive again today. And this is the sun's birthday. This is the birthday of life and of love and wings and of the gay, great, happening, illimitably earth. How could anyone, seeing, tasting, touching, hearing, lifted from the no of all nothing, being human, merely doubt, unimaginable you. Now the ears of my ears are awake, and now the eyes of my eyes are opened. This is a physicist, E.E. Cummings, inspired by John Muir, and channeling a celebration of Earth Day, birthday, and John Muir's birthday. And in our family, whenever we have an occasion that is momentous, it could be a marriage, it could be somebody going to heaven, it could be the beginning of a surgery. We say that, and then we say, play ball. So we're going to play ball. Me come, my dazzled face in such a shining place. Me hear the sounds of welcome there. My paradise shall be that they remember me. My fame, that they pronounce my name. And that's Emily Dickinson channeling John Muir. She was his contemporary. And she wrote, "Lest any doubt that we are glad that he was born today." So we are gathered here, and I am so grateful and honored and thrilled to see you as we are going to honor Earth and honor John Muir. It means the world to me that you're here, and I set out my recent book. It was a gift from me and my publisher, and a lot of the work in there is what John Muir has given me in my life, where I have been trying to do justice to his message and being when I am the world's greatest wimp. And when I try to be John Muir, it really doesn't work. I am the least likely person ever to be a John Muir person, but he's in all of our DNA, our common bond, and therein lies our story. As you already know, I'm not a singer, alas, nor a pianist. I'm a sometime actor and playwright, and mainly I'm a scholar and teacher. So it's been a blast to revel and marvel in Louie's voice that has come to me as I have imaginatively engaged with her story in loving John Muir as I do, to showcase the source of Muir's transformational role in our world. I teach Muir. I've presented on Muir for his birthday. I've been John Muir. I actually have one of my John Muir costumes hanging up. And I've been doing this for over 25 years, but it was my dream, and I was sharing this with Sally, to share John Muir with you. Sally's idea to present Muir to us in a new way, not a lecture, quote unquote, okay, through the eyes of his wife, has given me a scholarly and spiritual and intellectual journey and wholly unexpected joy. So I am totally, the last thing you'd ever want to do in talking to your classmates is to have something that isn't totally your most professional, polished thing. Going down the rabbit hole with Louie Wanda, she's singing to me, and I'm pulling off the road, and I'm in the supermarket, and I'm writing it down on the grocery bag and so on, because she's so excited to have her voice finally in a place of celebration of John Muir and that's because of you. So John Muir was married, said everyone I told about this, including people today. So she began to take shape in my mind as a singer, and she wanted a stage. She wants to play. So it's my joy that actual singers and composers, and you're going to see some of them today, will be working their magic on lyrics that I'm now nervously sharing with you. And I hope to have a version of this that's more or less complete by our 60th anniversary in 2026. And it's taken me into all the manuscripts looking for any evidence of where is Louis Wanda, because she's just not there in the record. But I did find something very interesting. And one of the things that we're going to talk about that I noticed is that he was always talking about everything is glorious. And you know, the title of our program today is The Glory, Loving John Muir. Everything is glorious. And he once complained that he was spending the whole morning in his studio when he could have been outside slaughtering gloriouses because his editor was saying, Muir, tone it down on the purple prose. We got enough of glorious. So I'm looking at the transcripts, and there at the beginning of his autobiography, The Story of My Childhood and Youth, in the very first paragraph, and I'm going to be reading that to you, he had a caret. He added a glorious. In the transcripts he read through before submitting them to the publisher, he's adding glorious. He's not, so you can never have enough gloriouses. So I'm honored and humbled to sally forth with my desire to bring the literary power, the transformational passion, and exuberant love of John Muir for this earth to us. My way of giving back for the glory of his shameless exuberance. So now I would like to give the floor to Sally.
As Barbara said, who knew that John Muir was married? I mean, we never hear anything about that relationship, how it allowed him to be all that he could be, go off into do what he needed to do. And so it's fitting that Barbara is going to bring her more to life for us today. Yes, in terms of his wife, Louis Wanda, that being married to John Muir was glory, both the way she saw him love the earth and loving him for over 30 years. So says Barbara Mossberg, a poet, actor, professor, and internationally known John Muir scholar, as she wrangles the love story of Louis Wanda and John Muir at their home on the Grange. Inspired by a lifetime of studying and teaching about John Muir, Mossberg invites us to celebrate Earth Day and John Muir's birthday with an original portrait modeled on John Muir's own self-description as a poetico, trampo, geologist, botanist, and ornithologist naturalist. At the piano today, Louis Wanda's favorite perch in their home, in the ranch house music room, which was also previously a water tank. Mossberg will give us a concert talk in which Louis Wanda, in heaven, is preparing a tribute concert for her John Muir on Earth Day. Threading her own poetry, the Muir family letters, original and historical songs, and story, she recollects their impassioned life, what Mossberg calls this unlikely pairing of wilderness and civilization. The world-famous adventurer and the private, formal lady whose rival mistresses wear fur and grumble and growl and roil and thunder, while she, a privileged Western princess, politely plays on, loved to the end, beyond her death, by a grieving Muir the last 10 years of his life. In this fantasy, as Mossberg begins to work out in her mind what their love looks like, we can imagine John and Louis Wanda's life and love, which Mossberg calls a rocky, star-littered romance.
As we gather round to celebrate Earth Day, John Muir's birthday, the man whose words and deeds gave us a vision of love for our Earth that was so passionate we have strived ever since to care for it with laws of conservation. We hear a love story, not only of man and wilderness, the glory, but man and woman, and in fact, not just a woman, but a lady of piano prowess brought up in Miss Atkins' Young Ladies Seminary. We sit piano side as Louis Wanda, the plucky Grange mistress, plucks at the keys, plucks heartstrings, preparing to give an Earth Day tribute concert for her man as she reflects on their unlikely union rooted in their common ground of music and flowers. We know he loved the mountains. Climb the mountains and get their good tidings. Nature's peace will flow into you as sunshine into trees. The mountains are calling, and I must go. And his raptures over rock, waterfall, water ouzel, squirrel's glacier. But a lady, her passion for fashion, clothes trunks, not tree trunks, from the Young Ladies Seminary, an aspiring concert pianist. Louis Wanda? We imagine their improbable love story. Play ball.
Just a few minutes ago, we were chanting Johnmuir, the John Muir fight song, famously, fervently in the Rose Bowl in our days, the top of our lungs. So Muir is being celebrated today around the world, and actually in California, this is officially John Muir Day, and Congress has set up today is John Muir Day nationally. But guess what? We were ahead of our time as a class. We were very precocious. We were eco-warriors saying, John Muir, fight, 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 because he was a person who was fighting with his words. So thank you for coming. One of the things that I wanted to say before we get into what's going on with John Muir and Louis, and to really frame for us why it's significant to even understand their relationship, that he had a relationship with her for 30 years, is that the things that he is credited for, he's on the California Quarter, he's striding forth, he's on the walls of the Smithsonian. Stars are named after him, glaciers, trails, woods, flowers, hotels. He's famous as the founder of the Sierra Club. And so many of the things that he did, his writings resulted in, I've given you those snippets. So each of you wave your snippets in the air, okay? Well, if you were John Muir, he would be walking around and he would have a thought and he would scribble it and he would stick it that size that you have on his belt. And at night, he would go home and around the campfire and he would record those in his journal. And then he would take his journal and he would put that in letters. And the letters would be circulated and they would end up with university professors and finally Congress and the White House. So he became this person who was asked to be a spokesperson for the environment and the wilderness, which at the time on his watch, 85% of the wilderness was being destroyed. And if we look at the dictionary definition right now of wild, do you know what the definitions are? Desolate, dangerous, frantic, frenzied, uncivilized, ungovernable. Wilderness is wasteland. If it's wasteland, you throw it out. It has no value. And if you're somebody who loves nature, how do you try to save it? How do you stop this kind of development that does not value it as beauty? And he thought he had to write. And one of the things that you will find, I've given you a program, it's sort of like a little book, but I wanted you to have all of his words. Well, he would say, this is so beautiful. If only people came to the wilderness, they would want to value it. They would think it was important. So he was a tour guide in Yosemite. In 1864, Abraham Lincoln signs the Yosemite Grant, and it's preserving Yosemite Valley and Mariposa Grove. He walks in there in 1868, 4 years later, and it's being hacked and smashed. It's being denuded. Everything is going wrong, and he says, this needs legislative interference. What can help it? So he says, I know, we're going to get people into the wilderness. So come on with me. So he'd be in front of a waterfall. And it would be like if we were all going to stand up here. Let's all just stand up, if you can stand up. Okay? So I'm saying, oh, the glory, the glory. Now you all just go like this. And they say, oh, fall on your knees. Reverence, reverence. Oh, rejoice. And people look at their watch and say, do you know what time lunch is back at the hotel? So he realized, thank you, okay. He realized that it wasn't enough just to bring people to the wilderness. We had to have a guide, if you will, to give us an idea of how and why to value it. So he thought he would provide words. And on your program, I've actually given 3 or 4 pages to just snippets of words that he used to describe glaciers and rocks and trees and moss and squirrels. And the way that he talked about it was so remarkable. It was full of, and you have it right in front of you in your snippet, but it was full of the words glory and rejoice and gladness. And we're thinking about wilderness as a dangerous place. He's talking about it as not only a safe place, which was revolutionary, it was a place of therapy. It was a place of healing. It was essential to our lives. My heart rouses thinking to bring you news that concerns you and concerns many men. It is difficult to get the news from despised poems. Yet men die miserably every day for lack of what is found there. That's William Carlos Williams. That's absolutely preposterous. He's making the case that poetry has something in it that's a matter of life and death. And you'd say, well, of course a poet would say that. But during the day, his day job, he was a physician in New Jersey. And he literally had blood on his hands. And when he would go home at the end of the day, he would write on prescription pads poems that were to cure him and his patients and us who read them. John Muir believed that if he could somehow look at this wilderness and extract from it language that expressed the power and the glory of it, we would want to do something to save it in terms of public policy. And so, Stephen, will you show us, we're going to do a run through of exceptionally put together PowerPoint, okay? So, first of all, we start at John Muir High School, where I'm not sure that it was on the curriculum to learn about John Muir. And certainly for me at UCLA as a double major in English and history, John Muir was never taught. He was not taught in an MA and PhD in American Literature and Studies, and running the American Literature program at the University of Oregon, John Muir was not taught. Okay, so we start there with this man. Let's just go through and see what we have. Okay, photo by Stephen Clark, okay? Where are we?
Yosemite.
We're at Yosemite, okay? If John Muir had not written the words that he did, that you actually have right in your hands, we would not have Yosemite National Park. It would not be looking like that. Okay, go on. All right. The issues that John Muir was fighting for are in our everyday. This is my inbox from a day or two ago. And what you're going to see, restore Hetch Hetchy, and you go to the next one, Stephen. Sierra Club stickers. Okay. In 1892, he forms the Sierra Club to celebrate Yosemite being made a park, public policy, but he knew we always have to fight for it. And now, about 4 times a day, I get messages from Sierra Club, which he was the president of until he died in 1914. They're selling stickers and gear, but it's in our everyday life, so let's go. So there he is. That was his hiking suit. Okay? So we're going to hear a lot about fashion, but that was his. Okay? Let's keep going. So you heard Stephen say a little bit of this. These are words that made not only him famous, but transformed the way that we saw our relationship with nature. The mountains are calling me. He's actually giving nature a voice. And it isn't just a voice, it's a song. He always is hearing it singing. Okay? And notice the word enthusiasm. And look here. Look at the way he just would talk. The enthusiasm, and he's just loving it all. Harmony, melody, gladness. Okay, let's go. Okay, where is that? It's not. Okay? It is Hetch Hetchy. Now that is an artist, a version of what Hetch Hetchy looked like when John Muir was there. When Yosemite National Park was made into a park, Hetch Hetchy Valley is like one of the natural wonders of the world. It's like butterfly wings. It's these valleys 18 miles apart, and they are identical. Rock formation, river, all of it, so that we think we're actually there. And the city of San Francisco wanted to drown it for a water tank. And John Muir spent the last decade of his life fighting desperately to save Hetch Hetchy, including being here in this room, in this house in 1907. He was here. His mentor was where we now have the Norton Simon Museum. He was hanging out at Charlie Vroman's with the Thrupites from Caltech. He was walking in the arroyo, and he was going around and begging everybody to not let it happen that Hetch Hetchy would be drowned. And even today, you can go to hetchhetchy.org and you're going to see how they're still fighting because it killed him. When they decided to drown this valley, he couldn't believe it. He went into shock. And a year later, on the anniversary of that decision, the Raker Act, he collapsed right here in Pasadena, and he died on Christmas Eve in the California hospital here in Los Angeles. And when he died, he was surrounded by the pages of his latest manuscript, Travels in Alaska. And he was desperately trying to finish that. And the very last words of that book, he was talking about Aurora Borealis. And he said, it was the most beautiful I ever beheld. And I love that the last word is beheld, because for him, beholding is the portal to what we see as valuable and what's going to save it. So he still has faith in us to do something about Hetchetchi. Okay. This is Louis Wanda. Get to her. And see, I've tried to recreate some of her things. Okay. So one of the things that we're going to do is I am going to try to represent to you her meaning. And the weird thing about it, and Sally, what you took me on here is when he describes anything that happens to him that's valuable, it's got to have the word wild in it. His first word of his autobiography, when I was a boy in Scotland, I was fond of everything that was wild. The natural wildness in our blood ran true on its glorious course, as invincible and unstoppable as stars. And if you're ever having a bad day, just pick up some Muir prose, and you'll lift. He loved what was wild, something holy and majestic and infinite. And then he decided that he was going to study botany, and that was a way to honor God. So he's botanizing, and he ends up with a day job in Indianapolis, and he gets his cornea punctured, and he's blind for a month, and he doesn't know if he's ever going to see again. And he says, if I ever do see again, I'm never going to work inside again. I'm never going to be inside. I'm just going to go and look at God's beauty. So he began to walk. He put on a backpack, and in the backpack he had a plant press and a journal and 3 books, which were really beside the point because he had memorized them all, the New Testament and Robert Burns' poetry and John Milton's Paradise Lost. And he walked for 1,000 miles from Indianapolis to the Gulf. Then he took a boat around the Cape, came up the coast of California, got off at Oakland, and walked to Yosemite. And there he found it being hacked and smashed. And what he said in his very first lines of setting out on this trip was, my plan was to push on in a direction by the wildest, leafiest, and least trodden way I could find. Folding my map, I shouldered my little bag and plant press and strode away among the old Kentucky oaks, rejoicing in splendid visions of pines and palms and glorious array. So that's the way he talked. And I didn't know this. So I'm at UCLA, I've not taught him, and I have a Fulbright to Finland. And I'm not taught him, but I began to think about the environment. And Krister and I were in Oregon, and we were driving on a lumber road, which was his idea of a wonderful time. And we were driving for hours, and it's a gravel road with 500-foot drops, and we get to a little plateau, and he says, isn't this wonderful? He's from Sweden, he's born in Sweden. There's nobody around for 200 miles in any direction. Isn't that wonderful? I became hysterical. And it was a matter of Thoreau shaming, of being gaslit, because Thoreau said, I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately and not discover at the end of my life I have not lived at all. And you know, that just wasn't me. I was afraid of everything, afraid of heights and afraid of bees and snakes, and you know, and I was just weeping. So the Fulbright director invited me to take a sauna at his lake property, and you had to get naked, and you had to jump in this lake. And I had to do that for the honor of Americans. And I came out, and I don't understand this, but I wrote this poem. Now, I have never studied John Muir, and it's called John Muir Takes a Sauna with the Finnish Ladies of Kuopio. And I have to give you a trigger alert, there's nudity here. Who has lain on Finland's boulders, doubts that rocks are breasts, have hearts beating within? The pink, warm, glossy Boulders of Finland, it's luxuriant flesh, pink, largesse, glorious, speckled, pink flesh, glistening, O God of largeness, moose or granite, God of pulsing heart. White wispy steam rises from the lakes, from the cloudberry bogs, from the ladies, from the fire, from boulder shoulders. This is prehistoric. Dinosaurs are going to appear at any minute. Trees on the ledge in the dark log cabin, flesh all about. The wiry, lean Scot is huge with ecstasy. He is tickled pink. He is a deep, deep pink. Flesh all about. Fresh flesh, smoking, steaming, quivering, baking, sighing and heaving like an earth a-making. At first, he's making mental notes to build a sauna himself for his place off the Awani Meadow of the Merced, a glacial place where the dinosaurs also rubbed their backs and left glistening scales. Then he is distracted, thinking of creation and glory. The large ladies surround him, and he is heating up. His blood will burst. Now to the lake, a pink parade they leap, not heart-stopping cold as the Merced, but as gold under the surface. And then the silver light of the storm coming up over the trees fiercely, the purple prose of the thunder as he climbs white now out of black water. Following the ladies, he thinks of the expression, it was a moving experience. He thinks of the expression, it was moving. He thinks of how trees do it, not just the limbs and the leaves, which anyone can see and which he knows because he visits trees and stays overnight, too overcome to leave. But the trunks, he knows they step magically and carefully as elephants. He is naked, wet and streaming. The wind is fresh with him, trembling. He enters the dark, steaming hut, smell of birch and smoke. And in the half-light, the pink flesh, the pink shoulders of giants, steam and stream and glisten and run, volcano, glacial runoff. He remembers how the earth was made, all molten, melting, how he would cling to these rocks, nest in their ledges. Cling, cling, oh pink, listening, earth inside. Oh, tremendous, tremendous. Now for the first time, he sits thinking of himself without bark. He is borne by the pink goddess of lakes, of Kuopio, who carry him, lay him on the dock. He thinks he's clinging to a rock. He thinks it is alive. He lets go and is flying. Trees dance and rocks breathe. Space is alive as any river. He thinks he is a pink rock warmed by sun. He has lost track of who is alive and what moves and what isn't alive and what doesn't move and what has bark and what has limbs and what has heart. But he knows that nothing is always there. So that must mean everything moves. Something must move it. He thinks of what or who moves us. He is so little, but he is so ecstatic. His vision of glory is huge as El Capitan, floating and cascading through the air. Heartfall, he throws himself over the edge onto the pink rocks, rolling and grasping the soft moss, sweet lichens in the cracks, murmuring and rolling his eyes. The ladies of Kuopio look on and approve. This man has gotten it right. And for some reason, I absorbed whatever it was that Muir was writing about. I had just written a book on Emily Dickinson. She wrote short poems. She was really pithy. He writes on and on like a river meandering in the meadows. So this love of wildness, then he's going to meet Wanda Louie. And now could we please have Hold the fort.
Oh, my comrades, see the signal waving in the sky. Reinforcements now appearing, victory is nigh. Hold the fort, for I am coming, Jesus signal still. Wave the answer back toward heaven, by thy grace we will.
How I loved to play that. Beethoven's Sonata Pathétique. They said at the seminary I could be a concert pianist. I loved it. Did someone say dress rehearsal? I love dresses. Did someone say play? I love to play, and I love rehearsals. I loved to play Beethoven. Papa bought me this piano when I was 16. When I was 16 years old, he bought me this. I had come from Miss Atkins Seminary, and they wanted to train us to be respectable ladies in society. We couldn't look in the mirror more than 3 seconds, but we had to dress for success. So here's my idea. What I am going to do is I am going to play this song for my husband's birthday today. Now, I never got to play it when he was home in the house because he got so distracted by the piano music when he was trying to write that I was consigned to the water tank, and that was the most soundproof room. But I love to play. I taught our daughters, and my hands now so arthritic, but I am going to play this for my husband as my tribute. John Muir was married. I know that's what people say. I scarce believe it myself. Louis Wanda, married. I lived after the seminary for 15 years, playing the piano, taking care of flowers. And I loved to host people. How do, Louis Wanda, ranch hand. Excuse me, I must take off my skirt. I must take off my skirt. How do? You know that ranch life is a little rough for ladies who want to. How do? And whenever I am going to have people come, I must serve sherry. Have some sherry, please. How do? Hey, there you go. Yes, how do? Here, have some sherry. And there is more to come. John went wild when I played. He was so stressed with his writing. So this was my practice place, even in heaven now. I love to be here, my heaven on earth. So what I'm going to do with this is try to play Beethoven at last. Beethoven was 27 when he wrote that, my age when I played it, when I met him, Mr. Muir, my John. So you're surprised? You're surprised he married me, a pianist? This is not what you envisioned? A ranch hand for sure in boots and mud. This mountain man, adventurer, maker of first ascents, sleeper on the ground, an outdoors man, wild man by all accounts. You would think he would shrink away at sight and sound of me, that I'm the last thing in the world he would want to see in my silk and lace, in my gloves and hat with veil over my face. But he sees nature wearing a veil. And this is how it happened. I was 32. People thought I was an old maid, living with my mama, Louisiana, and Papa on our ranch with my flowers and my piano. And then I played at the Grange. And Mrs. Carr, she kept talking about this John Muir, how we should meet, bless you. And she talked to him, she talked to me. Finally, we met at her house. He was carrying on, holding forth, of course. And he would, if you invited him to come over and say a few words, he would talk for like 3 hours, and he'd be really mad if you interrupted. He was beloved of all, dazzling them, and me too, a little. He said, and they would read his letters that he wrote to Papa and Mama. The mountains are calling and I must go. We're in the mountains and they're in us, kindling enthusiasm. Whenever we go to the mountains or any of God's wild fields, we find more than we seek. Holy is Sinai, the heaven alone. Oh, he is just writing in all these ways, and my heart is going flutter, flutter, flutter at these words. Oh, only in the roar of storms do these mighty solitudes find voice at all commensurate with their grandeur. Nature's darlings are cared for. Oh, Tissiacs seldom have lofty domes to give grace to their strength. No amount of word-making will ever make a single soul to know the mount. But this is where one may see God. Well, this is how it actually happened, the historical record. In the fall of 1877, John Muir, 39 years old, is guiding the Harvard botanist Asa Gray, and they are up at Mount Shasta. He floated 195 river miles down the Sacramento River from near Chico to Sacramento by himself, using a boat that he threw together. He then caught a train to Visalia, and then he walked to the gorge on the upper reaches of the Middle Fork of the Kings River, which most people think is unwalkable. And he walked, crawled, jumped, dropped, slid, and often swam. He emerged at the bottom of the gorge 12 days later, having gone the last 4 days with no food, but showing that the gorge was walkable. He took a meal, and then he took a stagecoach to the Merced River, and he constructed with his own hands a very crude boat from twisted fence boards he found, and launched himself upon the Merced for another trip of 250 miles. 2 weeks later, he rode past Stockton, and he ended up at the orchards of Dr. John Strentzel of Martinez, the father of Louis Wanda. And that is how she first met him. And you could imagine what this man even looked like. He would like nonchalantly, after he met her, he said, "How do?" He walked 20 miles to Oakland. He boarded the ferry to San Francisco. What was I to do with such a spirit? I remember that he would arrive by raft. I'm sure he made it with his own hands. This mountaineer with leaves in his hair like Pan. This man of the mountains, here to teach, to preach their good cheer, arriving at my shore. The sands of Martinez, Carquinez, like Odysseus, waves sent, landed on Nausicaa's land. And Papa was enthralled with his botany lore, and Mama too. And every time he came, then I'd appear like Homer's Phaeacian princess, and it wasn't in ranching gear. It was in my trunks of couture from Miss Atkins' Young Ladies Seminary. We weren't allowed to look in the mirror more than 3 seconds, but we had to be pressed. We had to dress to impress, to civilize society. One day I was playing at the Grange, Papa's favorite, Hold the Fort, and there was John Muir at the door, listening, and he came and joined us. And then this man, what a mess. This mountaineer who sleeps on the forest floor, who clutches trees, climbs valley walls, this man who slides inside waterfalls, this man who loves flowers and gazes for hours. He reads everything that's written. He is so completely smitten with the scientific flora. To him, it's all aurora to adore. He nestles with rocks face to face. And then the song that I heard her singing. He likes lace, he thinks lace, he sees lace in the flowers, in the stars. He's got heaven in his eyes, and everything he sees, it's starlight, it's glory. How he loves the rocks, the stones, the glaciers, yes, it's love. The water oozles, storms, falls, and streams. Anything that gleams, anything that beams, anything that shimmers, that glimmers, it's aurora, it's splendor in the grass and sky above. And when he says to me, lass, my lass, he sees flower, he sees rock face, he sees lace, he sees sky. He's got heaven in his eyes, and everything he sees, his wild ecstasy, it's starlight, glory, it's my face, the flower of me. But this does not mean that it was easy. Let's see. We met at Mrs. Carr's in 1874. She tried to be our matchmaker, and she would write me, "You see how I am snubbed in trying to get John Muir to accompany me to your house this week." And the notes from the biographer said, John Muir chose to go to Mount Shasta instead. But he wrote, "The lace-like fabric of streams outpouring over the mountains. Everything is flowing. The stars go streaming through space, pulsed on and forever like blood globules in nature's warm heart." 15 minutes. Okay. "The mountains are calling and you must go. How can I compete with sunlight on a range? Here I am with my piano for the Grange. Here I am with all my fashion. How can I compete with all that passion? How can I make my humble case?" And then there he is, wild from the river, smelling of moss and pine. I'm in his embrace. His whole mountain range, and he is home. His own flowers and fields of lace. And Joanna, let's put up the video of my singing the song for. So in the lyrics and the poems that I have written in Louis Wanda's voice, I then had to sing it for my musicians so that they would know what I had in mind, and then they were going to try to find the music in it. So let's see some examples.
How can I compete with the glacier?
Here, Steve,
I'd be beat by
on the side.
something with fur, something that growls and something that howls. That's not me, not Wanda Louie. Then I'd have to agree that to be home, that's me. I'll be fine, I'll be fine. I've got a man in the mountains, I've got a man in the mountains. Be free, on the loose, being free. No matter where he goes, he's got me. He can roam, the earth his home. I'll be here, his home base. I'll be here, his silk and lace will be fine. I've got a man doing good, as he should, as he could. I've got a man who's making the mountains glad.
So so that was what I was trying to do. Thank you. And it goes on. And then I'm going to show you a clip from what my students then made of that. And Stephen, this is the one, Silk and Lace. Okay, so now let's go to the next, what they did, and it's audio. Silk and lace will be fine. And so what Louis Wanda did, John Muir lived with her on the ranch. She had Helen and she had Wanda, and he was so miserable. And she said, John, you must go to the mountains. And she wrote him a letter, and I think it's the greatest love letter in history. And she said, you must go, you must write your books. Only you can do that. Stephen. We all came in on that. So this is the kind of work that we're doing, and hopefully by the 66, thank you, 26, we'll have them all done. And I've had such a good time writing them and imagining, like I would read what he said about a tree, and he loved the tree because it was 50 years old and it had burls and wrinkles, and he just thought it was so gorgeous. And so she says, oh, there's hope for me when he looks at me and I'm aging. And so there's a whole poem about how the geology, he looks at her and he's looking at her wrinkles, and he's seeing geology, and he's seeing fissures and cracks, and he just loves it, and the folds. And so she's getting more and more beautiful in geology, and it's the same with botany. So it's been very fun working on this. And if any of you are interested, I have the whole script that I prepared, that only for like 4.5 hours. So, and which is usually the case, but that's what happens when you work with John Muir. So I have a conclusion for us. And so I am wearing my mother's green coat that she was given by my grandmother to her when she got married, and she took the train from New York City, where she was working at a law firm on Wall Street, and she wanted to go to Yosemite and to see a real tree beside the one tree that was in the Wall Street Cemetery. And she was hired by Jenny Curry, and she worked there, and she just loved Yosemite, and she wanted to go back to the East Coast, and she needed to find a man and get started with living life in California. And I think the story goes, the myth, that I was there either at 4 weeks or 4 months in a picnic basket. And so I'm wearing this in her honor because it's because of her that we're in California, that I got to go to John Muir High School. And our family destination has been Yosemite for 75 years. And Stephen and my father would go on these Sierra Club hikes. When I go to celebrate my mother's birthday, I drive to Yosemite to renew my commitment to thank Muir for his Purple Pro strategies to bring to our world a consciousness of this precious beauty and wonder, so that, in his words, we love it enough to want to save it. That was his mission, to translate sensational love from the page and in turn to our minds. Enthusiasm is always suspect. And John Muir's genuine, unbridled, unrepentant enthusiasm, which means God is inside you, was his secret sauce that not only brought Yosemite into our lives, but John Muir High School and each other. And at one point he was ill, and he climbed to the top of a mountain, and he began to leap and to shout, "The glory, the glory." Sargent, who was the Harvard professor of botany and ran their gardens, was with him. And he's standing here like this. And John Muir says, why aren't you celebrating what we've seen? Why aren't you bowing down in reverence? And he goes, I don't wear my heart on my sleeve. And he goes, who cares where you wear your heart, little man? You're standing in the face of all glory of the universe, and you're sitting there and saying, well, I'm from Boston. Do the best you can, universe. Bring it on. So he always was really celebrating glory and enthusiasm. So, wonder, miracle, joy that he was born today. So what you see for the birthday is that we have 2 cakes, and therein lies the story. We have the beautifully decorated John Muir cake from Sally, and then we have another cake from Little Flower. Now, why do we have 2 cakes? Okay, so I'm at Tavern on the Green with my daughter in New York, and it's September, and we walk in and I say, it's my birthday. And she rolls her eyes, because if you tell them that it's your birthday at Tavern on the Green, they bring you birthday cake. And not just like a little, like ice cream with a candle. No, this is legit cake. It's got sprinkles, it's got layers. It is fabulous. It says happy birthday. So I love it. And she goes, Mom, you said that when you were here last month, and then you said it in May. So she's like the truth police. And I said, but I want the cake. She says, you could just order. I said, that's not the point. And I said, okay, maybe in December, I won't say it's my birthday. And then I thought it over, and I remembered E.E. Cummings, who said, I, who have died, am alive again today. This is the sun's birthday. This is the birthday of love and life and wings and the happening great universe. So I said, you know what? I'm going to say it's my birthday every day, and I'm going to have cake. So that was the first thing. The second family story is my mother's in the hospital, and I come down from Monterey, and I'm staying at our family house, and I decide that I want to paint it. So it's pink, and it has green shutters. So I'm on the roof, and my daughter's going, oh my God, what are you doing on the roof? And so I said, we need green paint if we're going to do the green shutters. I was so out of my league. So my sister calls up, and she's at the hospital, and she says, where are you? And I said, well, I'm at the paint store. She said, well, get over here. Okay, I'm coming. So I walk in the room. She's like this. What has happened to Mommy? Is she all right? What's wrong? And she says, where's the cake? And I said, what are you talking about? She said, you said you were at the cake store and that you were bringing cake. I said, paint. But what I realized after that is that it isn't just enough to say, oh, it's my birthday, earth, life, live. No. You have to bring cake. So here is our plan for celebrating. You get to have that cake, and then there's a whole cake that you get to bring home so that you don't show up wherever you're going tonight without cake. And so this is going to be, so I want us to all sing happy birthday and then happy trails, and then we're going to eat cake. And John Muir would never, ever let us go without the real way to celebrate, besides singing, which is to have whiskey. So our family is providing whiskey for us tonight at the bar. So let's sing happy birthday and happy trails. Come on and sing with me. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Earth and John Muir. Happy birthday to you and many more. Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling until then, until we meet again. Thank you, play ball.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling until then.
Who cares about the clouds if we're together?
Just sing a song and bring the sunny weather. Happy trails.